Tonight on Life on the Rock, we have Patrick Callahan. We'll see a video by Chris Stefanik and much more. Welcome to Life on the Rock. Tonight our guest is Patrick Callahan. He is the director of the Newman Institute for Catholic Thought and Culture at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. And they're a new program that's about 5 years old now, but they offer accredited courses on great books and Catholic intellectual formation that students can take for credit at the University of Nebraska. And it's all at their Newman Center. So he's going to be telling us about this program.
It's really a way to also cultivate, I think, our intellectual lives in the faith. And that's something really actually greatly needed today, as there's more challenges out there in the world, but we need to be able to respond, and I think in an appropriate manner. But just having an understanding of the faith is so critical, I think, for these times. So we're now going to a video by Chris Stefanik.
Life is a battle. You're fighting back hunger from your family, the world's influences from your kids. You're fighting to build a world and a future, not just for yourself or for your children, but for your grandchildren. And most of us don't get to be kings carrying swords into a battlefield as we fight for those we love. We get stuff like this. This is my grandpa's, John Stefanik. He used this as a Slovak immigrant to build the dream that I am currently living today. You see, most of us don't get to build up a world or fight for those we love in a way that's worth writing about in epic stories of great heroes. But here's the thing, not worth writing about doesn't mean not worth living, or not worth celebrating, or not worth great honor. God spent 90% of his life, 30 of his 33 years on earth, doing unnoticed quiet work, things that didn't make the story of the Bible, because they weren't worth writing about. I think he was trying to tell us something in those missing pages about what makes life worth living. Saint Joseph, who we celebrate today, is guardian of the Redeemer, patron of the universal church, terror of demons, spent his whole life hidden from any worldly honor, and as a poor, hard-working dad. The Bible tells us that he offered 2 turtle doves as his temple offering, which was an accommodation for those who couldn't afford a lamb. No one knew how important and amazing this man was, except Jesus knew. The woman he saw on the pillow next to him every morning knew, and God wanted Joseph to know. Joseph, son of David, is how an angel addressed him in a dream. But Joseph's dad was Jacob, right? No, that title, son of David, was a reminder that Joseph, you descended from King David, and even if the world doesn't see it, you have royal blood coursing through your veins, like your father before you. You are a king, a hidden king. I'm sure he remembered that title many times in the midst of the daily grind and stress of life, washing his 10,000th dish for the Holy Family, putting his shoes on for work for the 1,000th time, doing his millionth load of laundry. And remembering that didn't change the daily grind of life. It changed him. He didn't wonder, is there any point to all this? He did those things with the dignity of a king, because God reminded him of who he was. Listen, God wants to remind you of who you are. The quiet work of the everyday, God sees it. And those titles we tend to overlook, that the world doesn't celebrate, that have nothing to do with fame or money or worldly honors. Titles like mom, friend, brother, son, dad. Those are the greatest honors you could possibly have bestowed on you. God knows that. Do you?
Well, Patrick, welcome to Life on the Rock.
All right, glad to be here.
Well, thank you. And you're the newly appointed director at the Newman Institute for Catholic Thought and Culture.
Yes, at the University of Nebraska, Lincoln, teaching students there.
Okay. And so you've been involved with Catholic education for a while now, and this is a new transition for you going into this new assignment?
Yeah, started out teaching a program down at the University of Kansas. Bishop Conley, our bishop in Lincoln, his old stomping grounds, teaching students there. I taught some philosophy at Wichita State for a while, and then I was working at Emporia State at the Koch Center for Leadership and Ethics. And then I think in the previous segment that we did with Bishop Conley, he mentioned that the previous director, or foundational director of the Institute, Dr. John Free, decided that he was going to go off and found this new college, Kateri College. And they gave me a call, and we had some conversations, and here I am.
Okay. And the Newman Institute focuses also on the great books, at least that the Catholic Church sees as very valuable. A lot of them goes into the ancient literature, through the medieval to modern times. And could you comment a little bit on that?
Yeah, it's something that, it takes inspiration, not just, people talk more recently about, the Integrated Humanities Program in the 1970s at KU. But, I mean, it goes back, to the beginnings of the church. You look at St. Basil the Great or St. Augustine, right? We have these wrestlings and confrontations with an incarnational God who came into the Mediterranean world in a specific time and place, right? And so it's not just the Old Testament, right, which we look to as one of the influences, but what prepared the way for Paul in his preaching, right? You look at the speech in the Areopagus in Acts 17. It's this larger cultural context, and there was something there, and the church speaks of this too, in the Catechism and other places, where Basil talks about it as taking the gold from Egypt, right? We can't just let these people have great literature like Homer and Virgil. We need to take it in and baptize it.
Yeah. And one of the, I just remember I just actually recently having to do a paper on St. Augustine. One of his roles was, as an educator. And that was somebody, he was on this, this pursuit for truth, and he was raised Catholic, or his mom was Catholic, and, kind of was like, goes off into the world, goes into Manichaeanism. But then over time, in his pursuit, he's reading St. Paul. But he was a great teacher for the faith, and his works are still so valuable today.
On Christian education, right? I would put that up there in the sort of the threefold works, right? The Confessions, City of God, on Christian education, right? I think it's one of those works that we need to come back to. My own experience of reading the Confessions, I'm from New Jersey, where there's a lot of cultural Catholics, which is similar in some ways to what Augustine experienced. He had sort of first rites in the church, but pre-baptismal rites, right? And never actually went fully into the church. I was baptized in the church, never really went back to church after that, but I was interested in great books, right? And that brought me to the University of Dallas, a great Catholic college. But the fact is that most students today who are Catholic, who are even culturally Catholic, don't end up at Catholic colleges. You have over 90% of Catholic college students at state schools. So I was very fortunate that I had that experience. I was exposed to great books, and then I came into the faith more fully, went through RCIA. But something like this at UNL, where we have, 25,000 undergraduates, we have every week come through our doors at the Newman Center there, over 1,000 Catholic students for Mass every Sunday. I mean, that's the scale of a small Catholic college. So something like the Newman Institute for Catholic Thought and Culture is saying that we're going to let the state school pay for the football field, the biology lab, all the other things that they need to. Why start up a whole Catholic college when you can come in there, bring in some Catholic faculty, some Catholic experiences, and go to where the students are?
For me, I fall into that 90%. I went to two, secular universities, and I just remember even my time there, it's not that it was a bad education, but, one of the things, you're just kind of existing, and it's not that you're cultivating really a destiny, but you're just kind of just existing. And a lot of times it just kind of hit me that, it's like, where am I going with my life? And I think, unfortunately, like, it never even crossed my mind to even go to a Catholic university. It was just kind of, they're all the same kind of thing. And that was just very much my mentality. But, actually the value of a small Catholic school these days, like Franciscan or, a lot of these that you hear, Chrysostom, and also, just having access to the Newman Institute, just to recultivate, really is having an educational understanding of our faith. That's so valuable today.
It is. I mean, from the beginning, right, God is spirit, right? And so when you go to Thomas Aquinas, you talk about how are we made in the image and likeness of God, right? if we're going to perfect ourselves and come to realize a greater cultivation of that image, right? It's that spiritual image that we look to primarily. And so that's in the intellectual life. And I think what we're seeing in a lot of different Newman centers, University of Colorado Boulder, there's some institutes going now in Louisiana, what we're doing in Nebraska. What we're saying is, okay, Newman centers need to be more than just the sacraments, right? The sacraments are essential, but what is the particular vocation of a Newman center? We have university students who are going about their life's vocation, and you have the church, and there's sort of an inability to reconcile the two to make the whole person, to make them universal, right? So it takes something like what we're trying to do at some of these Newman centers with the intellectual formation to actually make it a university. The university lacks the church, right? And a lot of the Newman centers lack intellectual formation, which is what a lot of these new endeavors are about, is trying to say, let's reach them where their vocation is right now. And it's your eternal vocation, right? Your eternal vocation to know, love, and serve God.
Well, we have to go to a break, but whenever we come back, I want to talk about a little bit more about the Catholic education in light of an unbelieving world.
Sounds great.
Patrick, I wanted to talk a little bit more about just Catholic education in general in light of an unbelieving world. And I was reading kind of a recent study, but it's like 78% of people that fall away from just even believing in God and faith, say they actually grew up in a particular religion. Now they just identify as like atheist or agnostic, spiritual but not religious. And you kind of think of where is that in the Catholic context, because a lot of Catholics, young Catholics, they go off to college and then just the faith kind of bottoms out. They never go to Mass. They never think about the faith anymore. And so I think, just kind of stirring up, what it means to be a Catholic, it kind of does begin a lot in the home, but with education, I think. But really cultivating that spirit of why we believe.
Yeah, well, you and I were talking before the show about how often your own experience and my own experience of not realizing how much there was to the Catholic faith ahead of time. And it's the tricky thing about tradition, right? It comes from the Latin word trado, which means to hand over, which is twofold, right? Someone has to have passed it to us, and we have to prepare to pass it on to someone else. And it's a lived experience, right? There's sort of the foundational gymnastic experiential learning that has to go into your faith. So if your faith is just coming into Mass on Sundays, right, and you're telling yourself that you're checking off the box.
Exactly.
So as a parent, what I look at it as is there needs to be more, right? If you want to build habits, right, they have to be habituated, right? That whole thing in there. And so I would say, and maybe controversial, right, you can't just say that you're sending your kid to Catholic school and call that it, right? Again, there's the role of parents as primary educators in the faith. But then there's also just friendship, right? Friendship in the faith, right? So if you're actively Catholic, and it doesn't matter what age you are, living the faith with your friends, that builds that educational experience in a way that is not just books. But of course, books in the same way, we have to stop thinking them as separate in some ways. They're living words from people. They're in some ways sacramental with a small s, not the big S. But when I read a book, I give of my body and my mind and my words to someone else. So I stop for a moment and I resurrect the dead, whether it's Plato or Aquinas or the great poetry of Shakespeare or someone like that. I'm habituating myself into these Christian virtues of humility and what Aquinas talks about in the pursuit of wisdom, right? The first thing is you have to listen willingly. Right? And so reading books and experiences with friends and family in the world are ways that we can draw ourselves into the Catholic faith more deeply.
And I think too, as we were talking, it's, I heard a priest just say this, a long time ago, but it always stuck with me. It's like a lot of Catholics today, they're sacramentalized, but they're never catechized. And you can even probably push that even further to say they're not even evangelized. A lot of our, the just Catholic institutions have maybe become secular, and we got to reclaim it.
But the key point, though, is that the sacraments really do affect grace. And so in some ways, John Donne talks about this in his sonnet, right? Batter my heart through person God, right? Where he talks about his own heart and soul as a besieged city. But even if our children are only sacramentalized, that means that grace is there and that God is behind enemy lines, as it were, and he's just waiting for us to like call up the troops and to go into revolt against evil. So it's there. I think there's something there, but again, we have to provide them with these experiences. And if we just, again, my role in higher education, looking at our state school students, if we say, okay, they've done K through 12 education and then they're Catholic and we're just going to go from there. No, it's a lifelong process. And I hate to say it, but even heaven itself is sitting with the great teacher. I mean, the number one thing that Jesus is called in the Gospels, right? Teacher. And the Mass itself is a teaching experience. There are a lot of other models for it and types, but architecturally, the church is built off of what the classroom used to look like in the ancient world.
And I think too, just even looking at the hierarchy, the magisterium, one of their roles, their functions, is to be teacher.
Primary functions, and rather than bureaucratic paperwork, right? And you look at these things, you go back to the patristic fathers. That teaching role was a primary role, and I think that. Again, it's a matter of scale. It becomes difficult. And so you look at what we're doing in Nebraska, Bishop Conley can only be so many places at once. He's not Padre Pio. And he can have something with the Newman Institute. He has a seminary. He has Catholic schools. He has all these things that multiply his efforts to teach.
And I think, too, even just the value of good books, of actually just kind of cultivating that habit of reading something maybe religious or spiritual every day. Because I know that was something very much lacking kind of, as I was kind of growing up, but I kind of wish I had done more of that, of just kind of having that feel of the faith on just a number of just different aspects of the faith.
And like with so many things, with education, you don't always have to feel it, right? If it's a habitual virtue, and the intellectual virtues, as St. Thomas Aquinas says, are virtues, right? So these things that you're doing in education are virtues that you have to cultivate, right? It's a disposition of the intellect. And so even if you're reading that spiritual reading and you're just grinding at it 5 minutes every day, 10 minutes every day, I'm just reading this, I'm not getting anything out of it. You see no immediate fruit, but you are building soil. I think that's the thing that I look at higher education, Catholic education in America today. We have lots of evangelization and missionary work that throws seed, but we haven't asked the fundamental, intellectual question of where are we casting it, right? Are we throwing it on rocky ground, right? Are we throwing it in brambles? So what you're talking about, the daily spiritual reading exercises and other things like that, great books, even reading someone just like Shakespeare, right? That builds the heart of a magnanimous person, someone who has a great heart, right? And is educable, right? That can be taught.
And Patrick, where can we learn more about the Newman Institute?
Well, it's newmaninstitute.com. It's a very creative title. But newmaninstitute.com is where you can find everything about our classes, the sort of books we read, the programs that we run. We often offer pilgrimage experiences. While the core of what we do is focused on our college students, we also do outreach to K through 12 education and adult learning.
Well, Patrick, thank you for being on Life on the Rock.
Oh, thank you for having me.
I really enjoyed that interview. That is so great to have that kind of Catholic presence on a university, a state school, right, in Nebraska. And I love that line he said, right, take the gold from Egypt, quoting St. Basil. Take the gold from Egypt. You remember when the Israelites left Egypt, they made the Egyptians God made the Egyptians so well disposed to them that the women gave them their gold. They would use that to build the ark and to ornate the temple. So, we are to take the great things from the history of mankind, of our history of great books, great art, great literature. We're not afraid of where we might find truth. All truth comes from God. Celebrate it, learn from it, reflect on it, use it.
Yeah. I think there's a myth out there today that says people of past generations, of centuries, that they're just kind of ignorant, gullible, credible, whatever you want to call them.
Right.
That they weren't really thinkers.
Right.
But actually, you find that's the very opposite. Anytime you go into a lot of just Greek philosophy alone is actually just very mind-opening about what all those Greek philosophers were talking about. And even like somebody like Anaximander, I remember just reading across how he had already kind of developed the theory of evolution. And this is like almost 500 years before Christ. And you're like, well, I haven't heard of this, you know? Right. But there's so much wisdom out there. And of course, you know, the early church fathers, you know, they're well educated in a lot of the classics even of their day. And you look at St. Augustine, and he was kind of a bulldozer out there. You know, he was on a hot pursuit for truth. So,
yeah, but they used the philosophy of the ancients to explain the faith. Yeah. So that's our challenge this week, you know, to take the gold from Egypt, like take the time to intellectually form yourself, to study to read some great books, to study great works of antiquity, of the faith, and even of philosophy, or just great playwrights, you know. Because we all have these fundamental questions, especially young people, about what's true, what's a good, holy, heroic life, what's a moral life, does God exist, what does he want from me? Well, take the time, that's our challenge, take the time for the intellectual formation to answer these questions, and ultimately you'll be taking them to God. You know, take them to God in your prayer life. You know, this institute is going to be in the future offering podcasts and, you know, probably YouTube presentations of speakers and stuff. So there's a lot of information out there that you can tap into. Take that time, make the effort to take the gold from Egypt. So we'll send you into that vineyard with a blessing. May our Heavenly Father shine his face upon you. May he give you his peace. May Almighty God bless you, the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. We'll see you next week on Life on the Rock.
There are days that I still long for purpose, to see the plans that you have willed for me. And sometimes I am walking through the valley, I'm certain you are always right beside me. 'Cause even when I can't see, and you've gone before me, and I will walk by faith, I will walk by faith. The future is a mystery, forever will you lead me, and I will walk by faith, I will walk by faith. But I'm looking for a perfect answer to all the questions my heart begs of you. And if you give me more than I can handle, I will pray for strength to make it through. 'Cause even when I can't see, and you've gone before me, and I will walk by faith, I will walk by faith. The future is a mystery.